Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us today. As you guys already know, we have Renata Alvarenga today with us. Thank you again for sharing your time with you. Your journey is very inspiring, and we're really excited to hear about your experiences today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Do you want to start with a quick introduction?
Yes, of course. Well, hello, everyone. Well, it's evening here in Cambridge, but I think it's afternoon for you all. But I hope you're all doing well. So let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Renata. I'm 25 years old. I am from Brazil, currently studying at Harvard, the Harvard Kennedy School for the Master of Public Policy. And I'm also, as the title of the event today says, founder and director of EmpoderaClima, which is a gender and climate justice global initiative mainly focused on empowering young women from the global south to act for climate justice or to act in climate action spaces. So yeah, I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about my background and other things that you all want to know, but super happy to be here and thanks for inviting me.
So as I already mentioned, your journey is very inspiring. So how did your interest in the political field develop?
So that's a good question, because actually my interest in actual policy or politics is quite recent. Even though I'm studying public policy, I think I was very much more interested in like the global side of things. I did international relations in undergrad. I did 2 years in New Jersey at a school of diplomacy and 2 years in Brazil, and wanted to be a diplomat, and that was like my whole thing. But when I graduated, I got the opportunity to start my first job at the UK mission in Brazil, specifically the British Consulate General in Rio de Janeiro. And that role was of political analysis. So literally managing the bilateral relations between the UK and Rio. So Rio is a city and Rio is a state. And I thought that was really fascinating. So that aspect of working in the political world and, talking to mayors and to city hall secretaries and to seeing how change can be made in public policy at the local level is very interesting to me. So very recently, as I said, about 2 years ago, but I think my hope is to kind of bring together my activism with that policy background and make change in that. I don't know what everyone's majors are, but I think in anything that you do, policy is related to it, right? Or is a way that we can implement a lot of the ideas, a lot of the projects that happen at other levels. So I just think it's policy and politics are just a key part of creating positive change.
Yeah, for sure. That's super cool. Thank you. Kind of building on the politics aspect, how did you become involved in climate change justice, like advocacy, and how did you manage to present your work in different countries and at global conferences specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned I'm 25. I started when I was about 17, 18 years old. I was just going to college, and back then, as I said, I was gonna major in international relations, really wanted to be involved with the UN. It was like the thing I wanted to do the most, and be in those spaces. So I actually found out about this NGO in Brazil called Engaja Mundo, which basically means engage the world. And it started as this organization to bring young Brazilians to the UN space. So to CSW, which is the Commission on the Status of Women, or also to COP, which is the UN Climate Conference. And I joined this organization back in 2015 because I wanted to do the climate work and join the UN and all of that. And I ended up having the opportunity to go to COP21 that year, which, as you all know, was this huge climate conference up to this day because it generated the Paris Agreement. And just, I think 2015 was a huge year for global affairs in general, because of course we also had the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So because back then it was when I started my involvement, I think I was very lucky into coming into this political and global context of a lot of action that was starting to happen in the climate agenda and the sustainability agenda. So I think it helped me a lot in terms of getting involved. And as I mentioned, I had the opportunity to go to COP. And that was kind of my first exposure to the diplomatic world and seeing how policy is made, basically. I don't know if any of you does Mod UN, but I did a lot of Mod UN, both in high school and in college. And COP was kind of like literally the real Mod UN. It was like people around a table with their placards discussing what was going to be in the Paris Agreement. So I was really fascinated by that, but also I would say a little concerned about how little diversity there was in those spaces. So kind of like Mariwen, but with no youth, with a lot of men, a lot of old white males, and not a lot of young women, not a lot of indigenous women in those spaces. And we were talking about climate change, so it was quite concerning to me that those people that were most affected weren't in those spaces. So it's how I initially got involved and started researching throughout college about how climate justice was basically central to anything that we were going to do in climate action. So climate justice being this kind of human approach to climate change, right? So considering, as I said, young women, young people in general, and children, indigenous peoples, people with disabilities. So all of these groups that are generally marginalized in societies, and understanding that they have to be at the forefront of anything we do in terms of climate. So that was my first exposure. And I think it didn't come, like the rest of the stuff didn't come right away. And I talk a lot with like high school students, college students, and I think we're all just very like anxious and eager to start finding our field, or eager to get things done. But I do want to say that for me, it took a little while. I did have this opportunity when I was a freshman to do this, but it took a little while to kind of find my thing and what I wanted to do in my career. I still don't really know. I'm like figuring it out after grad school, see what happens. But I think throughout college, I started exploring more, and then I joined this United Nations Association at Seton Hall University, which is where I went, and became the president eventually after a few years. And through that, I got to do a lot of advocacy work for the Sustainable Development Goals. So talking with senators in New Jersey, or going to the UN to talk to some policymakers and things like that. So that's kind of how it all started, with this climate activism, this advocacy work. And then I remember actually ended up going back to Brazil in 2017, so 2 years later. And I remember the first conference that I actually got invited to like attend as a delegate. It was like fully funded, this crazy thing. It was in China, and it was a Sustainable Development Conference at Peking University. I remember I applied for this, and basically we all had to come up with a pitch of something related to sustainability that we wanted to do. And that's when the whole idea of gender and climate came. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll pitch something on that, but had no experience, but it worked out. And I think that was a defining moment, because then you meet people, and through connections and knowing what you want to do and the spaces that you want to occupy, I was able to apply to other things, and then eventually get invited to other things, and just occupy those spaces. So I think once you have that one really cool opportunity, you're able to kind of build on that and find your space.
So going off, you mentioned that you faced you saw lack of diversity in political field, and I'm pretty sure that as a young woman you faced fewer opportunities in our field. So can you share with us your experiences in starting your own organization on gender equality and climate change, and how were you able to expand your organization at the rate you did and provide resources and opportunities to those who need it?
Thanks for that question. I really appreciate it. And I mean, yes, I think being a young woman, as we all are, in these high level policy spaces is never easy. And I mean, when I was working as a political analyst back in Rio, it was quite difficult to kind of have my voice heard, or just kind of exert power, right? Because I mean, I'm not too tall, and I dress very girly and all of that. And sometimes a lot of older men just like don't respect you for that, which is really just doesn't make any sense to me, right? We should, and I think that's because we need to kind of shift this narrative, or this idea that the power comes from these men. But so far, we're kind of in that minority still, and we have to work a little harder to break these barriers. But EmpoderaClima, which is the organization that you were mentioning, came from that idea, came from the idea that if we wanted to change the outcomes of conferences like COPs, or be more ambitious in terms of climate in general, we needed those people at the front lines, not of their communities or just their communities, which they are already. Indigenous women in Brazil are leading the change already and have been, but we don't see that represented in global spaces such as the COPs, the climate conferences. So that was a little bit of what I was thinking when I created EmpoderaClima. That was back on the Earth Day, so April 22nd of 2019. So a little less than 3 years now. And it started very simply as this idea to launch a global platform, educational platform about gender and climate. And I don't know if you all have interacted a lot of this topic of gender and climate, but I know that when I started attending these conferences and talking about these things, I would come back home to my hometown in Brazil, in the South, and no one would know about it, not even my classmates in college or my family. It would be this very weird thing that people hadn't really explored about, for example, how women are more affected by climate change or anything like that. So that's when I realized that we needed to bring a little bit more of these conversations to Brazil, to Latin America, to the global South in general, because I mean, everywhere, honestly, because I know that even a lot of places in the US, people ask me about those correlations. And that means I think it's not as discussed as it should be in the policy spaces, in the media, or anything else. But of course, there are some really amazing organizations already in the US, in Europe, that are working on this. One big one that's kind of like a reference in the gender and climate space is We Do, which is the Women's Earth, I think it's the Women's Environmental and Development Organization. There's also We Can, which is, they're also similar in the names, but it's the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. So there's a bunch of really cool organizations that already existed in the US, for example, but not in Brazil. So that was kind of my idea. And it started very simple, just let's bring content on gender and climate to Portuguese. So maybe you could find like some videos, some podcasts, some things, but they're very like hidden in the internet, or like hard to find. So the idea was to bring it all together in a database in Portuguese, Spanish, and English, and then eventually we expanded to French as well. So that was the idea initially, just accessibility in terms of languages. But then it grew just naturally in terms of doing more advocacy work. So what I mentioned that I started doing in college kind of moved into doing that with EmpoderaClima. And I said that was natural because I think, as I said, even though there's some groups discussing gender and climate, there's not a lot of young people discussing that. So even these organizations that I mentioned, they're mostly of older women, not a lot of like teenagers or young adults. And even if you go to the COP space, young people are really not represented at all. Now, some countries are starting to add youth negotiators into their delegations, like I think Costa Rica, Chile, but not the majority at all. So I think that was the idea. And slowly we are starting to get more invited by, for example, the UN Climate Change Convention. They have a gender team that works on how you can implement the gender work into policymaking. And they started inviting us to attend these events and have the voice of young people heard, or we started attending the actual COPs and delivering events on that. So slowly it grew into this more advocacy and leadership organization in terms of getting those young people not only access to those spaces, but leadership in those spaces. And we're not there yet. I think it's really hard to do that, but slowly getting there. But I don't know if the question was how it got started, but that's kind of where we are at the moment. And of course, it's been challenging, as it always is. And now in grad school, I think managing that, and now I'm looking for summer internships and have all my classes and just a bunch of stuff going on. So not easy, but I do think that if anyone's looking into going into the nonprofit sector or just launching a project where they see that there's a lack of activities on or anything like that in their communities, I would say it's really amazing because you get to connect with a lot of people. So I have a bunch of friends that are in the youth movement all over the world through that, because you meet at conferences and you meet at other spaces. So I'm sure you all know that just from connecting in this organization focused on gender. But I think, yeah, it's really gratifying to be in a space where you can connect with like-minded people and just being powered by that, right? Because it's not easy to be in this movement. Just in the feminist movement, it's not easy, but in the climate one as well, there's a lot of talk about eco-anxiety. So I think having a community in that just makes it a lot easier.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that experience. That's really cool. And kind of building on like the aspect of gender, I'm sure like we all know that politics is like male dominated and especially government. So as a woman of color, like, and entering into the political industry that is predominantly run by men, how do you stay confident and focused on achieving your mission?
Thank you for that question. I think it's a great question. And as I said, very difficult one. I'm still learning, and I still sometimes feel like I'm not able to kind of exert my power that I know I have in some like high level meetings where it's just men and me, or just older people and me. And yeah, it's tough, but I think in terms of building that confidence and knowing your value and that you're meant to be there, even though imposter syndrome is a real thing, it can, it can get better at sometimes, but I think it happens at every level. And it's something actually that I found really surprising here, because I came to this very high level exclusive elitist university, which is Harvard, and I thought everyone here would be just very confident of themselves, and it's not really the reality. And I'm sure you all know, being at UCLA, which is also a very high level and exclusive place, there's a lot of imposter syndrome. A lot of people are just not sure of themselves and not confident, and it's crazy, right? Because you see all these people, all these amazing women with great qualifications and great power, but sometimes it's really hard to put that out there. But I think for me, it's helped to kind of be sure of my values. And my experience as a young woman is very valid, because young people bring a lot of really cool things to the table too. I think as you go to a lot of these COP spaces, especially in the earlier days, it was just very boring. The climate space, if it's like the climate science world, without a lot of youth energy, or a lot of energy from young women from all over, there's not a lot of action. Sometimes it's just talk and talk and talk, right? So I think I've always really leveraged my creativity, my boldness, and that energy into those spaces as something unique that I bring. So I think it's really important to remember what you bring to the table, because it's easy to get intimidated by all of the titles and the lack of experience that sometimes we have just because of age. But at the same time, we definitely have our value, and there's a reason that we're invited to these places, right? Or that we occupy these spaces or these high level universities. So I think remembering that and keeping that in mind helps me center myself into why I'm there. But as I said, it's hard, and I'm more often than not occupying those spaces, because I think there's a lot about tokenism to be said too, about being from the global south, or being youth, or any of that, because they will invite a lot of the times, they as in governments or the UN, like one young person to be in the room with I don't even know how many people, and be that like the diverse or representative voice. It's not true, right? Like, I don't represent a lot of the other women in my country or in the world for that matter, but I think being able to remember that and know that when you do get the chance and privilege to occupy these very high level spaces, you're representing more than yourself, right? And I know that for the COP experience, for example, because I think COP26 last year in the UK was the most, not even the most diverse, but we had the biggest Brazilian delegation. We had the biggest indigenous delegation as well that came to COP ever in 26 years. So that was huge. But of course, it's not a lot of people still, right? So I think everyone that went there went with this huge responsibility and way of all of these groups that couldn't be there, right? So that's kind of what I try to remember, the responsibility, the privilege that I have to be in those spaces, and it keeps me going. And when someone tries to say, you don't have the experience, or tries to undermine you, you just have to really stand in your ground and know your worth, even though that sometimes can be hard. But we're working to change that, I think, as a young feminist movement.
I'm pretty sure that a lot of us women in political field can relate to the experiences that you mentioned. And I'm definitely sure that sharing your journey and the work that you do is very inspiring and empowering for a lot of us. So thank you for that. So kind of going back, you mentioned earlier that you started political advocacy during college, and I'm pretty sure that networking has helped you a lot. Do you have any suggestions for networking on campus as well as outside the school environment?
That's a great question. I mean, I think college is the best time to kind of as I said, find your niche, find what you want to do. And I think the best way to do that is through networking. And honestly, I had a meeting today with a career coach about summer internships, and we were just talking about this, about like if you apply for a job at the UN in like a random pool of jobs, it's really hard to get it, right? You need to have that network. You need to know someone in not a bad way, but it's just that there's so many people that apply to a lot of the things that we want. There's like thousands and thousands of applicants. So I think a good way to make yourself known, or to kind of show why you deserve to be in whatever position that you want to be in, is that networking aspect. So I can't emphasize it enough, the importance of finding those people for you. And I'll say for me, one really important person in that was a professor that I had. She's actually in the international law world, Catherine Tinker, and we met, I think my freshman year. She was my professor for human rights policy, and we just had a lot of things in common. She had worked as a professor in my hometown in Brazil, and was also very interested and involved in the climate world. So I was able to invite her for a coffee and kind of establish that relationship. And we ended up building that in many years. She also had this institute on international law, and I was able to intern there after a few years. And to this day, I mean, she was one of my recommenders for my graduate school application, and we still talk, and I'm delivering a talk at her class this semester. So that's just an example of like this long-term networking of this professor that I met back in 2015, but it's because I invited her, for coffee, and was able to establish that relationship, that I think we've been able to find that common ground and create that relationship as a student and professor, and then mentor and mentee and all of that. So that's just one example. And I think college, as I said, is a great place to do that. So I don't know if you all have someone in mind. I think sometimes, to be honest, it's a lot easier when you have a woman mentor in that sense. And I think that's why a lot of times there's these programs, right, about like women's empowerment and mentorship, because it helps sometimes to understand a little bit of the struggles in the field that you're in, which sometimes can be extremely male, such as the political field or the legal field. So I think it really helped me to find that mentor in that sense, but also other people that I've networked throughout college, that some of them have joined EmpoderaClima later, just like classmates. And that's another thing. Your classmates or your friends at the university are also your network, right? And are people that you see later on, maybe in your jobs or something like that. And a lot of people that I met through the nonprofit work that I was doing throughout college, like the political activism, have later been people that I've constantly seen at COPs. So, maybe they're in different roles, but you see them. And if you need to do some advocacy work, maybe they're in this organization that you want to cooperate with. So you never know. I think people will most likely than not, especially nowadays that we're so connected, stay in your circle, and you'll be able to call them up for something in the future, right? Which is not a bad thing. I think a lot of times we can relate to that as like, oh, you're just thinking of that in terms of this interest that you have. But networking, everyone does it, and it's important so that you can be able to get to the places that you want to be in. But I think there's also that aspect of not like being embarrassed of doing so, you know what I mean? And like sometimes it's scary to do those types of things and reach out and send that email or call someone or come up to someone after an event or a lecture that you just heard. But I think that can change things. So really being bold and being like, okay, I'm going to talk to this person, introduce myself. More often than not, you'll find that those people, especially like older leaders or mentors or people that are more established in their careers, they'll be open to talking to you more often than not, because they're really interested in young, powerful women and students that are kind of looking to pave their way as, as a young professional in this world. So I think it really helps to talk to those people and get their advice. Sometimes it won't work out and it won't be a relationship that stays throughout time, but sometimes it will. So I think being able to be bold really helps in that sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think networking is definitely super important. And like for myself, it's something that I'm struggling with. I think sometimes we forget that like our professors have like office hours and we can go and like introduce ourselves and say hi, but that's something that I'm definitely working on. So thank you for that reminder. Circling back to your journey and kind of how you are, like how you got to where you are right now, were you always sure that you want to go to graduate school? And like, what were the steps that you needed to take as an international student, if there were any extra steps?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think a lot of the times nowadays there's this pressure to go to grad school, and a lot of the jobs, like for example in the intergovernmental organizations like the UN, will require like a master's degree so you can get in there. So I think it's a great good path for everyone, but it doesn't have to be for everyone. So it really depends on what you want to do with your career. So I think I do have some friends in my program in the Master of Public Policy who graduated from college and went into this program right away. Not many, it's not the majority, because this is more of like a professional program. So we don't have a thesis or anything. It's more like out in the real world, soft skills and all that kind of thing. But I think a lot of us have a little bit more work experience. I just have 2 years. Some people have 5, 10 years, or are in like more advanced programs. But the bottom line is everyone here maybe doesn't know what they want to do after, but they have an idea of like what kind of impact that they want to have. And that's something that's really, really important when you're applying to grad school or thinking about grad school. It's kind of like that moment where you stop to think about what you want to do next, because I think a lot of us are just thinking, okay, I want to get to that school, or I want to do this next. And I really had that urge as well. But I think as time goes on, and I applied in 2020, and the peak of the pandemic, and I was back home living with my parents and didn't know what I wanted to do, and working so many hours, because I think with home office and working virtually, my hours in the political kind of world kind of got a lot more expended, which wasn't the best, but at the same time it allowed me to kind of sit and think what I wanted next in my life, and if this is the kind of life that I wanted to live, or thinking about my next steps basically. And I think grad school what was a result of that self-reflection and that thought process of what I wanted to do. So I still don't know exactly what I want to do, but as I said, I think to get into a lot of those spaces, you need the graduate degree. And I really wanted to be able, as I said, to kind of merge the climate activism world with the policy world and the government work that I was starting to do. And I really do think that no matter which sector we're in, as I said, we need public policy. So that's kind of how I came about this decision, but it was somewhat long process. I wanted to go to Europe at first. Sciences Po in France was like my first choice. Didn't want to apply to the US just because scholarships are hard, and I didn't have the financial means to just pay for grad school here. Luckily, I ended up getting a full ride, so I don't have to worry about that. But it's hard, and it took a lot, to find all of those things and be able to make that decision and to come here. And it doesn't get easier either. I think like there's just different stages of life and different challenges that you go through, both when you're in high school and now in college. I'm sure it's not easy at all. I remember a lot of difficult times during college in terms of knowing what I wanted to do. And there's so many things happening at the same time that it's hard to figure it out. But I think the challenges, as I said, don't get easier, but it's nice in a way to be in grad school and kind of be in your mid-20s and kind of know what you want to do, or have that thing that you're really passionate about. You know what I mean? So I think for me, because I've found that, it's made a lot easier to apply for things, as we were talking about, conferences or join study groups, or kind of enhance the work that I already do, and make it better and make it more exciting. So yeah, grad school has been really great, but I think the decision process to get to this point took me a few years, and took also a global pandemic to kind of realize that I didn't want to be working in that field as of yet, and wanted to get more experience and feel more confident, which I think is also related to the gender factor of things, and being from Brazil and all of that, and kind of creating that reputation, which sometimes, or more often than not, is needed, having those credentials, which you all have, going into college right away. So I think, yeah, that's been a little bit of my decision making, but I think I'm still figuring out what I'm going to do after it, and how am I going to make the best use of this degree, because you really can't do anything. And some people are going to go into PhDs later, or are going to go into the public sector or international organizations or nonprofits. So you really can't do anything. And I think we don't ever stop learning, or kind of not even doubting, because I hope at some point I'm like sure exactly where I want to be. But I think just being curious, and having that passion to go into different places and exploring different career paths, I think is really positive. And grad school is one really cool way to do that, because you get to interact with people from different countries, from different backgrounds, and kind of have that global exchange and kind of learn where you're supposed to be.
I think you highlighted a very important topic, because sometimes we just want to do a lot of things at the same time. And I think it's important that, as you said, we just like sit down and reflect what we're actually passionate about. So going off this topic, as a graduate student, what advice would you share with our undergraduate body who plans to attend graduate school, particularly as competitive as Harvard?
Wow, okay, what advice? I think that piece on the self-reflection is key. And I'm very into astrology, for example. So that was important for me, because I was able to kind of leverage that and understand myself before I knew what I wanted to do. But it doesn't have to be astrology. It can be those like tests that you can do, like personality tests, whatever it is, but really to understand yourself. I think that's kind of the first step, to understand who you are as a person, as a woman, as a professional, and knowing where you want to be. Because not even just for yourself and to decide where you want to apply to grad school, but also for the application process, you need to kind of know that, in a lot of ways, the grad school applications, and I've applied to a few schools in the US, and one in the UK and one in France, and all of them were a little different, but the common factor, I think, was being very confident about why now. Like, why do you want to go to grad school now and not in 5 years, or why didn't you want to go earlier? So really understanding where you are in life and why this is the best time to go was something that was requested of me throughout this process. So you don't need to think about that now specifically, but I think as you're building your curriculum and your expertise, because you are, as I said, in this super kind of exciting space, which is college, and there's a lot of clubs and there's a lot of activities and internships and things to get involved in, really use that experience and that time in your life to explore and find what you want. And again, you don't need to find it now. And I think a really cool thing about the US is that you can declare your major a little bit later, whereas in Brazil, you're 17, you take this test for this one major and that's it. If you want to do something else, you have to apply again and get out of college. So I really think that the system that you have here really allows you to take some more time to see what you want to do and explore a little bit more. So really do that and know that you have some time. I had this idea when I was in college that I was going to graduate, do 1 year of work experience, and then go to grad school. Ended up not being the case because I liked my work experience and wanted to, take some time to stay there and just not be there for 1 year and already applying to grad school. And that worked really well for me because I was able to kind of develop my leadership experience within the UK mission in Brazil, and ended up, I think, helping me a lot in the application process as well. So there's no like recipe, you don't need to see someone you admire and be like, okay, that person went to college and then they did this and then they did that, and that's what I'm going to do, because your path is unique to yourself, and that's okay. So you could take more time, but then maybe you get to like a happier place than if you rushed and just took the first thing, or rushed your application to grad school, even though maybe you didn't want to do that at the time. So I know it's like very cliche advice, but enjoy that experience. But I really do think it helps. And by the time that you do graduate and think about grad school, whether it is right away after college that you want to apply, or after a few years working, either way, I think you'll feel more confident, and that will show in your application. Because I applied to a few schools, and for example, I applied to this very small program at Stanford that I didn't get in, but then I got into Harvard. So there's no recipe. I think you all know that because you are in a very competitive schools, and maybe you faced that experience when you were applying for undergrad. But it's weird, right? Sometimes you get into places that you didn't expect to get into, and you'll be rejected by places that you expected to get into. So that's normal, and that, I think, shows a lot of your fits. So where are you supposed to be, and where do you fit in the best, and where's your passion at? So I think I really wanted to be at the Kennedy School because I like this kind of broad curriculum of public policy that I could graduate and do a lot of different things after. So that really helped me into the application. And I think that showed that passion and that engagement and willingness to be here. So that will be really important for you all. But again, you have time, I think, for now, just kind of getting inspired by some people, some women that are where you want to be, not in the sense of, okay, they did that, I'm gonna do the same, but like, I think that, I want to occupy a similar space that they're in. Maybe it's an organization they're in, and you can connect with that mentor or that person and kind of slowly build your path. But again, everyone's path and journey is unique, and you'll find yours as you go. But I know it's hard to say that when you're in college because you're anxious to get things done and find your passion and find your thing. But you will definitely do that for sure. But I think it just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was really important advice, because I feel like in college we get pressure from like our school and our friends and our parents that we should like know exactly what we want to do in the future. When people ask you like what your dream job is and like what you want to do after undergrad and stuff like that. So definitely, I think it's important to like remind ourselves that we can like just go with the flow and kind of see what is in the future. And kind of continuing on with the idea of giving advice, and this is like a final question to kind of conclude this event. Looking to the bigger picture, what advice would you give to the next generation of women leaders?
Yeah, I love this question. I think a lot of the work that we do, just like as people living in this era, is about the next generations, right? And sustainable development is about that. If you look up the definition of sustainable development, is a lot about making sure that the resources that we have now as the current generation is also kept, or something like that, for the future generations. So it's that idea that we should preserve our planet and have development, like economic development, but also with that sustainable aspect that it's for the next generations as well. So it's something I think about a lot. And I think a lot of the work that I do in terms of occupying a lot of high level spaces and bringing more people and a lot more diverse people to those spaces as well is about the next generation, so that when the children or the young girls that are currently in preschool or middle school right now are in college or are in grad school or are in the workforce, that they're able to occupy those spaces and not have too many issues. And I know that's kind of like a very ambitious dream, maybe we won't have gender equality in a few years, hopefully we will, but I think that idea of not even paving the way, because there are so many amazing women leaders that have done amazing things, but kind of just changing the narrative that women deserve and should be in those spaces. And there's a lot of research, honestly, that shows that when we have more women in parliament or women in Congress or women in leadership positions, we have more environmental friendly agreements. For example, we pass more ambitious climate bills or climate legislation. And that's true not just in the climate world, but in any area. And I think in the pandemic, we've seen that a lot, right? Like a lot of the women leaders all over the world have shown a lot more ambition and a lot more action in terms of tackling COVID-19. So it just goes to show that when we have more women in power, we have better outcomes, simply put. So I guess the next generation hopefully will have an easier time into doing that. And, hopefully by then we'll have more women presidents all over the world or women prime ministers. But if not, I think just my hope and the work that I do, my inspiration is to make sure that these young women, these young girls feel empowered to do that and to occupy these positions. And EmpoderaClima is kind of like a play of words in that, right? Empower for climate in Portuguese or Spanish. And that's the idea, is that through education, through making sure that Latin American young women or, young women from all over the place are able to access resources and access education, and through that get empowered to occupy those spaces. And all of us here are powerful women and occupying high level quality education spaces. So I think it's really important that we also leverage our roles and our access to those to bring more people in, and younger people. So I think the more that we can do that, I'll be really happy. And I think it will really change our policy world. It will change our diplomatic world. It will change our politics nationally in many different countries. So that's kind of what I hope happens, which I know, again, I'm very ambitious with those goals. And I call myself an optimist a lot of the times, because I think having that approach of what we call the glass half full approach to climate justice or to gender equality helps, it helps bring more people in, and helps us understand that we can do this. But it is, of course, in no way easy or a seamless path. There's going to be a lot of challenges, but I think when we're able to come together as a network, as a community, and that's why I always say that I think finding your youth movement or finding your group really helps in doing that. I think we're gonna be able to cause a lot of impact and create a lot of positive change.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm also hopeful that women like us who share the goal of empowering other women in political and legal fields are going to be able to make change for future generations. I want to thank you again for joining us and sharing your time with us, sharing your journey with us, because I'm pretty sure that your experiences are going to be helpful for a lot of our members.
Of course, yeah. Let me just quickly thank you all also for the invite. I'm super honored, and whenever someone's like, how are you inspiring or how are you leading, I just also am in this journey trying to find myself and find what I want to do. But I think it's been great connecting with young women like yourselves, and being able to share a little bit of what I've learned in this journey with you all, and hopefully that helps in some way. But I'm here, I'm available. I think you can maybe share my contact or social media, whatever it is, and we can stay in touch. But I wish you all the best of luck in your college careers, in your college paths, which again, I know it's not easy and it's tough being a young woman in those spaces, but you're all powerhouses, and I'm sure you'll do great. But yes, please go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to thank you all.
Thank you also, and we also wish you luck on your great journey, and we hope you will continue your impactful work, and we'll definitely share your contact with our members.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thanks for the invite. It was really fun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.